2018. This is our second year doing this. Yeah, thank you. It's like, last year was our first year, and it was so amazing, and it's just really inspiring to continue to people psyched about these events. And it was our first year doing it in LA, and thank you all for coming out and supporting, and for coming to this panel. I think we have some really, really cool topics to cover, some really amazing ladies. Firstly, I just want to say thank you to all of you. Thank you also to our sponsors, the North Face, obviously. They did an amazing job. I don't know how many of you got to race to see how fast you pulled your rope yesterday, but the best time was like 9 seconds, so y'all are fast. I also want to just remind you all that 10% of all the proceeds from this event are going to Brown Girls Climb. Well, my excitement is going to cause some feedback, I'm sorry. But for those of you who don't know, Brown Girls Climb is, they're a community that aims to promote and increase visibility of diversity in climbing by establishing a community of climbers of color. They're encouraging leadership opportunities for female climbers of color in particular, and by creating inclusive opportunities to climb and explore underrepresented communities. And you'll get to hear more about them from Summer before Beth's keynote, so stay tuned. So I just wanted to, for those of you who didn't know, the theme for this year's panel is taking care of each other. That's sort of the lens that we're going to be looking at a variety of topics with these lovely folks. And we're particularly interested in how to maintain the relationships and the traction from the movements we started last year. Last year was our first year doing Women Up, and is also REI's big
Is this one gonna work? Ah, there we go. This is way louder. I'm gonna hold it kind of away from my face. Thanks, Allie. Oh, obviously, thank you to our route setters also. If you guys haven't said thank you, they did such an amazing job. I don't know how many other events there are out there where people set comps with all female route setters, and like maybe none. So this is really incredible. Huge thank you to all of you. So stoked. But anyway, panel theme is taking care of each other. So how do we maintain the traction from the movements we started last year? How do we honor and celebrate each other across our different experiences and identities? How do we take care of one another when some aspects of who we are intersect and some of them don't? And how can we do better for one another and sort of continue this great energy that we've sort of started to see happening in the climbing industry? Just a little overview. The panel's going to be about an hour and a half long. We'll give you a 30-minute Q&A at the end. I'm going to try and be pretty good about timing, so apologies to all of these incredibly smart and erudite women if I cut you off. But hopefully that'll give you a chance to come up and talk to them afterwards, and we can just sort of keep chatting. And so I'm also going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. I'm very excited this year, so we can just go on down the line.
Okay, it wasn't on the list of questions. I'm not prepared. Okay, my name's Shelley Sella, and I climb at Berkeley Ironworks. I started climbing at let's hear it for Berkeley, huh? And I started climbing at the age of 57, and I'm 61 right now.
Hi, I'm Maricela Rosales. I am from Los Angeles, California. My home gym is here at Cliffs of Id. I am part of the national team for Latino Outdoors. I am the Advocacy and Outdoor Brands Coordinator. I'm also an ambassador for Bad Rock and working to change the traditional narrative of who goes outside, who are those athletes, and how do we protect our public lands and green open spaces.
Hi everyone, my name is Summer Winston. I'm from Louisiana originally. I've been in California for 2 years. Yes. I'm one of the co-founders of the Brown Ascenders, and we work to increase visibility and accessibility for gyms, making them financially, emotionally, mentally accessible to people who may feel uncomfortable in gym spaces normally. Yeah.
My name is Jackie Hueftle. I'm a route setter from Boulder, Colorado. I've been setting for 20 years, and I also have a climbing hold company called Kilter. And I was the head setter for this event, which has been really awesome. And I had 10 other awesome route setters helping me out, some of those guys. And I don't know where the other ones are.
My name is Alex Johnson. I'm a professional climber. I've been climbing for 20 years. I recently saw a meme that said there's all these people in hell, and the devil was like, "Welcome to hell. Everyone wants to get along. Like this is." People were like, "This is gonna be great," and then the devil was like, "Go around the room and introduce yourselves," and everyone was like, "No." That's how I feel right now about this.
I'm Beth Rodden. I've been climbing for 20 years, and I think you'll hear more after this. And here's Emily.
All right, I'm Emily Harrington. I'm a professional rock climber also. I've been climbing for 21 years, so I don't know how you've only been climbing for 20 years.
No,
It's been long.
I don't know, that's true. I'm averaging. 20,
All right.
yeah, I don't know.
Hopefully we can get more of these mics working because we have 5. All right, this one's for Jackie. Jackie's gonna talk a lot.
Oh, boy.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just talk about how long you've been climbing and compare notes. No, I have real questions for you.
I was saying that I saw Beth at a hard climb, like right when I started climbing, and she was climbing on it, so I feel like she probably has been climbing longer than me.
I've been climbing 24 years.
Yeah, 4 years makes a big difference.
Oh, yeah, okay.
All right, I have a timer here, just so you guys know that's what this is. I'm not texting, I promise. Okay,
I'm just
ready to start this off?
We're the snarky commentary.
That might work for you guys. Shelley and I can share.
Keep it to ourselves.
Okay, so to start off, I just wanted to address the entire panel. We can sort of go down the line if we want, at least for the first one. But I'd like to ask each of you how the climbing community has taken care of you. How is it not? I think that we're all here in a large part because climbing feels really different for us. We've experienced a certain kind of like support that we haven't gotten elsewhere, or like a lot of people will come to the gym and be like, yeah, climbing's really fun and cool, but what I really love are the people. And so I'm curious about what your experience with the community has been, if it's been different than other aspects of the world in terms of what you've been receiving, and if the difference in that community has mattered much to you, like personally or professionally. Yeah, we'll just go down the line.
Aren't you glad you're sitting next to me, Lee?
I didn't know what I was getting into.
No one does.
She seemed nice. So again, I climb at Berkeley Ironworks, so that when I think of climbing community, that is the community that I'm talking to and talking about. And I've gotten support from that community from the beginning. When I did my first V1, first V4, V5, I did, which was really amazing. And now I'm working on doing more than one pull-up. And I think a lot of people at the gym know about my struggle to do one pull-up. And I've gotten a lot of support for that, which is very, very helpful. But on a whole other level, I've often had this mantra that climbing, it's cheaper than therapy. And in fact, what I've realized is it is therapy. And not that long ago, a very good friend of mine died unexpectedly, and I went to the gym. And I talked to the climbing instructor that I've worked with, Jeffrey, and I told him what had happened. And he was very kind, very supportive, and then said, well, let's climb. And that was amazing. It was just an amazing hour of climbing and being in a different place. And to me, that's what support is about.
So for me, I've been climbing for about 10 years, on and off. It's a love and hate relationship, but the reason I always come back to climbing is the community. When I first started climbing, I was wearing a neck and back brace. I was 200 pounds and dealing with my own struggle to find myself as an individual despite my disability. When I went to the rock climbing gym, no one judged me. If anything, people would come up and give me beta or just talk to me about what I was doing or if I was interested going outside. So going to the gym was my safe haven, but it was also a place where I learned a lot about myself. I learned how to be more patient, challenge myself, and literally my back and my neck brace threw in the trash can. You know, it was life-changing, and at the same time, my dad was dealing with colon cancer. And Latino communities, you know, sometimes they struggle with the fact that adventure sports can be part of someone's life, and it's a little scary for them to know that. But my dad gave me the blessing before he passed away to continue rock climbing, and the community found out. And instead of, you know, hiding, you know, in my room, being really depressed, you know, I was getting calls. I was getting people literally dragging me out of my room and telling me, we're going to go outside, you're going to take your homework, you're going to finish, and you're going to climb. And with that climbing community mindset and that just the culture itself, it just like really just kept me together. And there's nothing that I wouldn't do for the community that has given so much to me, and I just want to pay it forward.
I think I've been climbing the least amount of time of everyone sitting here. So I've been climbing, I'm at the start of my 3rd year climbing. And like for me, like climbing fits just who I am as a person. I have a very like curious, analytical mind. I really like to solve puzzles. And it's just nice to be in a space with a bunch of people who are doing the same thing inside of their heads. And when I first started climbing, I was living in Texas, and I was like at the end of a breakup that was a very necessary breakup. And so like, yeah, like kind of like Shelley said, like climbing was therapy, and I would go and it would just be me and the wall and nothing else, and that's the only thing that mattered. And like from one move to the next, and like the people there, and they were just, I don't know, they were all there with the same mindset and the same purpose. And for me, when it comes to climbing, like community has become everything. Like if I don't feel like I have a solid community in the gym space, or like when I'm out like climbing outside, I feel off. It doesn't quite feel like it as good as it can feel, basically. Yeah.
This is kind of for me, so I've been climbing since 1998, and I was like 16 or something, and it was just a sport that I enjoyed more than other sports that I did, so I grew up doing all the sports. But, well, I think I did all the sports, all of them. Did not play cricket. Yeah. The world's best cricket player, by the way, is 5'5" tall, it turns out. I looked that up the other day. So, yeah, you should see his outfit. It's amazing. So, anyway, yeah. I don't know, climbing's just been, I always describe it as a sport for people that can't find a sport that they fit into or feel comfortable in. I think it's super good for women especially because it shows you like a strength that a lot of women never get to find out that they have. Like Shelley was saying, she's struggling to do one pull-up. That's like awesome. And that's an amazing, it is. It's like, I know you can do 1 billion pull-ups, but like there's so many women that can't do a pull-up or even think that they can do a pull-up. And so I just think it's really cool to have a sport that like gives you this confidence about yourself, because it really is, you do it as a community, but then it comes down to like you and your own kind of ability to solve problems on the wall, and that's kind of one of the things that we all get out of it that makes us feel amazing. And then also just being able to have that amazing feeling at literally every grade level. You know, you can push yourself and find out something new that you didn't know you could do and overcome challenges at every single level that you'll hit in climbing, which is one of my favorite things about it.
Yeah, following that, climbing is a sport that you don't necessarily have to be an athlete to do. Have you seen Daniel Woods ever try to jump rope? Or like do a box jump or a squat? Yeah. You don't have to be athletic to be a rock climber. For me, I've been climbing since I was like 8 or 9, and I guess this sport and the community raised me in that sense. And like I think I met Emily at my first youth nationals when I was 9, and the same thing with Natasha, and we were like, last night at dinner talking about, like, she was like, you always used to wear these same red and white board shorts and had puka shells and braces and bleach blonde hair. And I was like, and you still loved me. So it's just such a, like, welcoming and all-encompassing community in the sport, I think. Like, we're still friends, and it's been 20 years. This is, like, the sport has longevity in your relationships. Like, my best friend in the world I met at Youth Worlds when I was 13, and we live on opposite sides of the country, and we kept in touch and, like, would fly out to visit each other, and that's, to me, what this sport is community and meaningful connections and relationships, and this sport raised me.
I got one.
Oh, glitter.
We have the gold one. I'll echo a lot of what Alex said. I don't really think of climbing as a sport, but it's more of like a family member to me, because I definitely was raised in climbing, and I've lived a pretty public life in climbing through, a public marriage and a divorce, and the community in climbing has always been there for me, whether it's, ebbing and flowing in and out of it. And I think that that's one of the great things about climbing, is that you can be so many different things in the community, and there's still a corner of that community that's going to accept you and, going to lift you up. And so for me, it's always just been there.
Yeah, I mean,
it's hard to go last.
It's the same. Ditto. what they said. No, I think that there's a reason that those of us right here have been climbing for 20 plus years. It's because it's not, when I started climbing as a 10-year-old girl, it was just another sport like soccer or whatever, but it evolved as I evolved as a person and kind of changed with me. And I think that it's that climbing's ability to like connect us together and to teach us about ourselves and to teach us about the world around us is what keeps us going back to it, and it's what makes it more than just a sport. It's what makes it something that's lifelong, something that I will continue to do into my 60s, 70s, 80s, no matter what grade it is, because I'll still get the same like feeling of passion and the same feeling of community and all of those things. It's not something that ends. It's a lifestyle, so it's not just a sport.
Thank you. Oh, yes. Thank you guys so much. We're actually on time. I'm so excited about that. So now that we've established that we all love climbing and love the climbing community, why don't we dig into it a little bit? So Shelley and Summer, you're all welcome to jump into if you feel like it after they've had their chance to speak. But you're both like relatively new climbers, and we all obviously love the community. But I'm curious, as a sport that doesn't yet fully represent who you are in terms of youth or race, I'm curious what it's been like being a part of that, entering a community that doesn't quite wholly represent who you are. And if you have any thoughts on like some of the ways the community can begin reflecting a fuller picture of your identities.
So I think I was chosen to be on this panel to represent old white ladies who climb, right? No. But actually, I think like all of us, we have many identities, and we're not just one thing. I'm also a lesbian, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm an abortion provider who travels out of state to provide abortions. And I actually have gotten support for every one of those parts of my identity from the climbing community at Berkeley Ironworks. So I'm actually extremely appreciative of that. But as an old white lady who climbs, here's the thing. We're either going to die or we're going to get older. And so I think all of you who started climbing when you were 5 or 10 or 15, eventually you will be 61 and older. And there will be a lot more older climbers. And I don't have the solution, but I think that will be an issue for gyms. How do they reflect the multiplicity of identities that climbers have? I know at Ironworks there are older climbers who meet regularly and climb, And I think that the gym really is working on that. I don't have any exact answers.
So for me, let's see. When I first started climbing, I was living in Texas, and I was climbing for a year before I saw another Black person in the gym. And that was an interesting experience. Like, I went into climbing originally because, long story short, I went on a bad hike that ended with like an extreme vertical. And I thought, if I knew how to climb, I would be less terrified descending this thing right now. So then climbing seemed like a good thing to try out. And so like I entered climbing because of that, because I thought it could solve a problem that I encountered. And then when I entered the gym, I met a lot of nice people, but it took, like I was climbing for maybe 3-4 months before I bonded with anyone in the space. And then it took a year before the first time a Black person walked into the gym. And when she did, I noticed her. And I was like, oh my God, I want to talk to her. But I was like, I can't walk up to her and be like, hey, you're Black, I'm Black, let's be cool. It's like, I knew that wasn't something I could do, but like by maybe midway through our session, we had gravitated to each other. And then I told her that thought, and she laughed, and she was like, I thought the same thing. And then we started climbing together, and then we slowly started growing a POC group of just climbers in that gym. And I feel like that speaks to something, that like of all the people in the gym, eventually like I built a community that reflected who I am both inside of the gym and outside of the gym. And it was a little challenging in the beginning to keep going back. It was a combination of like not really bonding with anyone in the beginning of the space. I think it was like, there's also like this thing I think that goes with climbing where people want you to prove yourself. There's like, oh, you're new, but like, so it's like I had to like first prove that I knew what I was doing to some capacity, which I did not. Was so very bad at it. But yeah, so I mean, it was a combination of that and not bonding with anyone and not really seeing anyone who looked like me that made it difficult to keep showing up in the space. But then like the love for climbing continued to grow. So I stuck with it because of the love for climbing. And it's a part of the reason why we're doing the work that we're doing now with the Brown Ascenders, because I understand what it's like to walk into a space and like not see people that reflect what my life looks like outside of the gym and how difficult that could be.
So for both of those, I think that's a big part of what we're trying to do, what I think setters should be trying to do and gyms should be trying to do is the community grows a lot. So there's all these new gyms going up right now, and we want these gyms to succeed so our whole industry succeeds and grows. And you know, indoor climbing is basically its own sport now. Their competitions, the Olympics, is indoor climbing. And that's completely appropriate. It's great. It's a super good way to work out. It's fun. It's interesting. It always changes. It's convenient. You can come climb for an hour at lunch and get a good workout. You see what it does to your body if you look around this room. Like, it's just a good sport. It's a good way to work out. And I think that there's a few things that go into that. And one thing is, you know, inclusivity in the setting. So you're setting climbs for older climbers who, you know, Shelley probably doesn't really want to fall off sideways 10 feet off the ground. So with a variety of, you know, with not just the setters being diverse, like in gender, but also just setters of diverse styles, understanding that these lower grades that you would be setting for, you know, to get people into climbing, we want to give them appropriate challenges for their ability and things that look fun to climb and feel relatively secure, so you can progress and get into climbing and feel like challenged, but also like you can do something, and you feel safe doing that. We had a really old climber. I don't want to say anything I said last year, but we had a really old climber. This guy, Jim Garber's been climbing forever. He's like 70-something. And in my gym in Boulder, we can't put screws in holds. And so he was topping out our biggest feature, and the hold spun, and he face planted from like 15 feet up on our luckily brand new floor. He got 2 black eyes, and he was fine otherwise. And we were just like, oh my God, we almost killed Jim Garber. But it just... These are like things to think about when you're setting, like what could happen, and if that happens, what's going to happen. And as we get more people into climbing, trying to help provide them with a good experience. So part of climbing that's fun is that it can be risky, but you want to provide those risks at an appropriate challenge level for the level that the climber's at. how much knowledge they have, what kind of decisions they're going to make, and try to give people a good experience. Because essentially, you want to convert people into lifelong climbers and lifelong, climbing gym members if you're a climbing gym owner. And if you give them a bad time or injure them, they're not going to have that turnout. And then for climbers of other backgrounds, other color, other everything. When the first time I walked into a climbing gym, I remember thinking, oh my God, everybody knows I don't know what I'm doing, I need to leave. And I realized quickly that everybody's pretty interested in what they're doing more than what you're doing. So there's actually a lot of room to try things. And usually, I don't feel like I hope this is becoming more and more of a thing in climbing, you don't have to prove yourself and that you can do certain difficulties of things. You just have to be excited to be trying things. And then people are excited to, I hope you have this experience, I hope everybody gives this experience to new climbers in their gym, are excited to climb with you and try to help you if you want help, or not help you if you don't want help, but to support you or whatever it is, to kind of like let you become a climber, basically. Help you become a climber.
If I may add, I just want to give a shout out to Remy because she has hired a lot of people of color, and so there's a lot of brown folks behind the desk. We do, here in LA, we do have a huge representation of a Latino community, and I know that when I see my fellow brown people and sometimes they're trying to figure stuff out, I'm like, ¿Cómo te puedo ayudar? And just giving them that peace of mind, they're just like, oh, this place is really welcoming. I'm interested. And so, kind of giving that safe space for them to kind of navigate a new sport really brings more people in. So now I'm seeing more people of color coming into Cliffs of It, which is really awesome. And, as women of color, we navigate the world a little differently, just knowing that there has always been those disparities, hostilities, those biases, and I feel like I've always had to work even harder to prove, myself in the outdoor industry. And that in itself wasn't easy. I almost gave up a few times. I'm like, you know what, I can't do this. But at the end of the day, I was like, if I don't do it, then who? And when will it happen if I don't do it now? So, just being here on behalf of Latinos, women of color, Latino Outdoors, and then just every other group that's coming out, Brown Girls Climb, Brothers of Climbing, Melanin Base Camp, they're doing such an awesome job representing us in social media, outdoor spaces, and indoor spaces. So it's just a matter of how we look at ourselves internally and how can we externally just do better and just have these intentional and authentic conversations with someone, and it changes the landscape altogether.
Yeah, it dovetails really nicely into the next question. Just I love, it's one of the many reasons I love working with Jackie's, because you're so thoughtful about what it actually means to be setting routes and trying to make it a good experience for everybody who's coming to the gym. But it can be really hard to feel comfortable in a space when it's just everybody here is really nice, but nobody here sees me or I can really relate to immediately. So I wanted to sort of segue into the work that you, Summer, and Marcy are doing to increase visibility and support and participation of people of color in climbing through the Brown Ascenders and through Latino Outdoors. And if I'm kind of curious about some of the difficulties that have been coming with that, because we all want to pat ourselves on the back for being super inclusive and doing a lot of hard work, but it's work. And I'm really curious about the ways that you feel that the community or the industry can really support the work that you're doing, and if there's anything you sort of want to speak to beyond just oh, we're doing so well, look at these conversations we're having.
So just a little background on Latino Outdoors. It's a national nonprofit organization. We have about 13 regions right now throughout the U.S. About 80% of our volunteers are women, and we have 2 paid employees. So literally, this organization is run and trailblazed by volunteers who are doing amazing work in different regions. And that in itself is an accomplishment, because in the outdoor industry for a very long time, it was dominated by cis white males and privilege. And now we're starting to see a shift in who is actually going outside, who are the leaders, and how they're being supported. And so you're getting the outdoor industry really trying to be better, do better, and then change the way that their marketing looks. One, for the money, it's smart, but 2 is because you want to be equitable, you want to be inclusive, and you want to diversify the space, because demographically we're all going to change. We're not all linear, we're multicultural, and we're all interconnected. At the end of the day, we're all human, and we all want to do the same things more or less within the sport. And so one of the challenges that we've had is just funding to making sure that the organization is being sustained and not just have 2 employees. That we end up, having the other volunteers actually trained, have those certificates, become those guides, and in turn, changing the way that sponsorship looks like with brands, community ambassadors, community athletes, because in itself, any outdoor sport is set in a way where it's privilege plays a part in that, because not everyone has weekends to go outside and recreate. Most people of color, have to work extra hard, or just the jobs that they have, or even families, getting families outside. A lot of them are underserved, or live in certain areas demographically where they can't sustain an outdoor lifestyle and support a family. So everything in itself is all interconnected, and having brands to support the organization, it changes the way everything looks in long term, but that in itself takes time, because you have to hustle the brands. You got to make sure that you're not, I call it mom style. It's like, I'm mad. No, I'm not mad. I'm disappointed. But you have to strategize that disappointment so that there's a positive outcome that's successful and sustainable.
So I think for us, with the Brown Ascenders, we've had a lot of support from Touchstone. We just happened to have the great luck of being on a bus with Mei Lee, with her sitting right behind me, and I'm like, I want to start a group, and then her little head popped over the seat and said, hey, if you're serious, Touchstone will support you. And I was like, whatever. But she really meant it. And so we've had a lot of support right out the gate when we decided to start doing something in October of last year. And it wasn't just through Touchstone, it was a lot of the rest of the community, Melanin Base Camp and Brown Girls Climb and Brothers of Climbing. We've had a lot of support from the other groups that are also fighting the same fight that we're fighting. So it's been really good in terms of helping us grow in that way. And I've never done this type of work before, and I'm in love with it. And a part of the challenge is just learning how to do it in a way that works really well, where people are getting served in the ways that they need, and that they're getting what they need from our community. Some of the things that we've had to fight against is people who don't need our space questioning the validity or the necessity of the space that we're creating. And it's like, how do you fight back against that, against someone who doesn't need that space, who's historically never really needed someone to cut out a space like this for them, within a gym, out at the crag. How do you get a person like that to understand, hey, you don't understand this because it's not your fight? And it will require you to step outside of yourself and get in our shoes for a minute and see what it's like for us. And it's difficult, and it can be disheartening because people are mean and they say really, really crappy things. And so just trying to not let the negativity discourage us from what we're trying to do. And every time we have a meet, it's at the end of it, I always feel so just excited if 30 people show up or 5 people show up. It's always just the idea that someone came, they've maybe never tried climbing before, they've always wanted to, or they couldn't afford to come when the day passes are $25, or we have people that come to our meetups that can only afford to climb at our meetups because they can't afford to pay the membership and they can't afford to pay the day passes. And that's huge, and that's a part of the work that we're doing. So I think a part of the things that we fight against, or a part of the things that could fight against us are issues of accessibility. Right now we have this great relationship where we can provide accessibility, making things financially more accessible for people, but things change and you never know, and just also helping people to understand that we're doing this work because the work is necessary. And for the people that are showing up for these meets, they're showing up because they need this type of environment in their lives. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm also interested in some of the different dynamics of representation for minority identities that aren't visible. We have the great pleasure of having several women on this panel who identify as queer, or at least not straight in some way. And so I'm so sorry to put you in the hot seat, Alex. But at least you knew this was coming. And you've spoken openly about being queer and climbing, and I was curious if that's affected your life as a professional athlete, especially if if like what the community or industry response has been like for you in that?
100% positive. I don't know. I had expectations of it to not be 100% positive, just because of like, I won't get political, but whatever, you know. You know. I had like a whole thing prepared, but I forgot.
That's fine. It's a
Just
conversation.
No, it's been amazing, and I didn't really have expectations when I like made my little Instagram post, and a lot of it came down to like, I moved home, which I swore I would never do, and I started coaching at the gym I grew up at, and half the kids on my team are not straight, and they just own it, and they're so badass, and they're like, yeah, I get bullied in high school, but whatever. And I'm like, that's fucked up. Like, this 13-year-old kid is like getting bullied in high school for liking girls. Like, that like flipped a switch for me, and I was like, fuck that. Like, I like girls too, whatever. And then I posted on Instagram and was like, well, that's out there. And it happened really like, whew, yeah. I just did it, and there was no thought about it. But like, working with these kids and like seeing them struggle in school, and like, I grew up there, and it's straight and white, and it's Midwest, and it's conservative, and there's a lot of religion, and it was just like, and I was like, I'll never go back. I hate the Midwest. And being out here, I feel like it would have been a different experience. I don't know. You guys are all like, wait, it's California. Like, it's California. You guys are open and accepting, and you always have been, which is why Republicans hate you. Weed's legal. No, I don't smoke weed, but it's legal, so it's cool. No, I actually don't like it at all. No, I hate it. I don't like it at all. But it was like working with kids who own it and accept it, and they're probably going through like the same thing that I would have gone through in high school, where I just was like, I'm different. This sucks. Is what it is. Like, whatever. And they just were like, yeah, I'm struggling with this. And a lot of them, like, some of them on my team knew, and some of them didn't, because I like bring Bree around and show pony hair. I'm like all the time at the gym. That Bree's on the stairs. Hi, that's my girlfriend. And she's like in the gym all the time, and so my first little girl who was like, I like girls, I get bullied in school, and I was like, oh. And she was like, are you homophobic? And I was like, yeah, me and my girlfriend are super homophobic. Like, watch out. And she was like, you have a girlfriend? And I was like, yeah. Like, who you think I just bring my like best friend in the gym all the time? Like, with our dogs? This is my best friend and our puppies. This is our adopted child with my friend. Like, and she was like, oh, and then she just was like, oh, I just get bullied in school a lot. She'll come in to practice and have like really hard days and really down days, and I just like, I see that affect her so much, and she's the coolest, she's so badass and the coolest kid, and like 13 going on 30, but for real, like, I always joke, I'm like, I don't have any friends in the Midwest, like I moved back and started this 40-hour-a-week full-time job, like my best friend is a 13-year-old, because she's like such a mature adult and is already like so taking ownership of who she is, and that was inspiring to me. Just these kids that were like, I am who I am, like, take it or leave it. And that's sort of like,
it must be like a big deal for them too to have like an authority figure, like a really important person in their life, be like, oh yeah, not only do I support you, but I share that identity with you.
yes.
And yes. And so for non-professional climbers, like Summer, Marcy, and Shelley, do you also sort of feel seen in the climbing community? Does it really matter to you, especially for Marcy and Shelley as queer women of color? Like, how, like, does climbing intersect with that in any way?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of have like a hierarchy of identities that happen for me, right? And like POC is at the top. And then I'm not quite sure where queer falls. It's in there somewhere. And like I'm also not sure where like my like female identity falls either, like on that spectrum. For me, it's always like POC on top and then the other guys that come below. I mean, I'm from deep South Louisiana, where it's just not okay to be a lot of things. So like moving to like California, it's like Alex said, it's like a breath of fresh air here. Like I went to a work function. I'm a professor. I teach graphic design, and so I went to a work function. And I went with one of my best friends who's from the Bay Area, and one of my coworkers who's also queer. He pulled me to the side because I've been introducing her as my friend all night. And I was like, this is my best friend. And he pulled me to the side. He was like, you are beautiful, and you don't have to lie here. We're in California. You can tell the truth of who you are and just be who you, if you want to wear a bow tie to work, and I'm like, have on a bow tie right now. I was like, I don't know what's happening. And then like, I figured it out, and I was like, yeah, but Robert, she is my best friend though. But that's kind of like, I don't know, like I think that kind of sets the stage for my answer to this question, that it's like here I don't even have to, that's a part of my identity that I don't even have to think about. Like I don't have to like worry about how people are viewing me. Like my best friend, he's trans and he's moving here and he's in New Orleans right now, and it is not, Louisiana is just not a good place to be anything, but it's definitely not a good place to be trans at all. And I'm like, dude, when you get here, like the world will change, I promise you. And I don't know, so that's how I view California when it comes to my queer identity.
You have puppies with your best friend though, right?
Yes, we do. We're gonna, when he moves here, we're gonna live on the same land with our puppies. So yeah.
So I never really identified as LGBTQ until I really just this year decided, you know what, I'm just gonna come out. I identify as bisexual, but I've always been masculine and feminine. You know, and it's one of those things that I just never brought it into the gym, just never really had those conversations, never had a group that I would talk to about. I would still hang out at the LGBTQ center at the university when I was going to school, but I just kept to myself the entire time because I wasn't sure how to navigate that. And then being bisexual is kind of complicated. Like no one knows, like, are you really a lesbian? Or do you really like guys? Are you just curious? Like, what's up? And so my validation is I got a wiener dog. And she's lesbian for me, you know. I love my wiener dog. So that's like the best of both worlds, you know what I mean? But I just never brought it in, and there's a few folks in Latino Outdoors that really are passionate about, you know, representation, people of color, LGBTQ, and just having these conversations with them and then learning different languages. Like we have Miche in Washington, Washington. She identifies as they, and I kept on calling her she, her. And I kept on having to take a step back and just like, okay, really understanding the language first so that there's a safe space that they can come to and not feel like they have to be this identity. And so, you know, having these conversations with them really opened up my eyes for myself. Like, okay, so what does bisexual mean to me rather than the actual definition itself? And so I see myself as more like gender fluid, you know, kind of navigating the space, you know, really appreciating individuals for who they are and not what they're assigned or what society puts on them as a gender role.
So I'm an old white lady and I don't have anything to say about this.
That's great. It's really good for our time. Well, I mean, all that's so like just amazing to hear, and I imagine that that's kind of a relatively new change in climbing. And for like Alex and Emily and Beth, you've been climbing. Jackie also, sorry, you're in this too. But we're gonna talk to the athletes for a second. Not that you're not an athlete. Yeah, we just keep digging deeper. Like I'm curious if like how you see the climbing community and industry has changed over the past 20 years. Especially as like professional athletes, if you had any things that helped you like start your careers when you were younger, if you think things are different for like young aspiring athletes now, how's your experience different now than when you first began climbing?
I mean, I think it's massively different in terms of the level of participation and the level of accessibility with the explosion of climbing gyms. I mean, now there's multiple climbing gyms in every big city, and it doesn't matter if you grew up in the city, you can still go to the climbing gym and experience climbing. And events like these and all the other events that are going on around the country are making it possible to get out the word that climbing is a sport that should be for everyone, that climbing is something that everyone should experience, that it's this wonderful thing that brings us all together, and we have this amazing community, and we are inclusive, and we're having these conversations that are really important and that are making everyone feel welcome, hopefully. And when I was a kid, I was probably one of the first generations of kids who grew up in the climbing gym. So I started in a gym. And before, you kind of had to grow up in the mountains in order to be a rock climber. And so that breeds a different type of climber. And I was a gym kid, and I think that was like the very, very beginning. But since then, you just see like an explosion of participation among kids, among women. I mean, there's so many talented, amazing young athletes right now, and I think that it's not only upping the level of the sport, but it's just like increasing the popularity of it. And climbing is becoming something that's not just for mountain people. Climbing is literally something that's for everyone. And so I guess that's the biggest difference that I see right now.
I echo that completely. I think that the explosion of climbing gyms has brought the mountains to the cities. And I was, like Emily, I grew up in the climbing gym, and there weren't that many kids that were climbing. It was mainly older white men that had been climbers and had climbed all over the world, and now they were using these as training gyms. But now it's just for everyone, and it's amazing to see the amount of participation from kids, from every generation and from every walk of life. I think it's completely different. And I think that companies like that I work with and have worked with for decades see that as well, and they're changing their marketing, and they're changing their inclusivity as well. And I think that's totally warranted.
I think you guys covered a lot of it. I think right now, to me, gym climbing and outdoor climbing are almost two different sports. And they're not translating as easily as they used to. And I think that this event specifically, like we talked about this a little bit last night at dinner, the route setting at this event in finals, it was reminiscent of like old school comps, aside from that one paddle dyno. But like it was like hard pulling and not volumes. It wasn't like parkour. And a lot of the competitions we see these days, and even indoor climbing, is like volumes, parkour, run and jump, dyno, run, balance, coordination. And this comp especially was reminiscent of like mimicking hard climbing as much as we can inside, mimicking hard outdoor climbing as much as we can inside, and that was really cool to compete on again. I don't know where I was going with that. Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, I'm also...
yeah, that's why I liked it, huh?
Alex, I'm also curious because you've sort of transitioned from being a pro climber and you're a youth coach. What's that transition been like? And are there things that you feel like you're trying to do now? I mean, you talked a little bit about this earlier, but you're trying to do now for your kids that maybe you wish you had when you started climbing?
Yeah. Yes. Again, yes. It's harder coaching for me now because I'm not as good at the style of competition, and that's kind of why I pulled away from competitions when I did. Was like the format, not the format, but the route setting started getting really crazy, and like it didn't mimic outdoor climbing, and that's I think what I liked about indoor climbing. It was like hard pulling, grab a hold, do a hard move, pull, and this like run and stand on a volume, jump to another volume, step across stuff. I wasn't good at, and so having to coach the next generation on moves like that is something that I'm like, it's a learning curve for me, and so I'm practicing those moves, and I'm trying to get better at that stuff so I can be better for them.
Did that answer your question? I sort of lost myself there.
I have a question to that. Do the kids these days that you coach, are they only wanting to excel in competitions, or do they see the team as a gateway to going outside and improving outside? Because I feel like it's two drastically different things.
They're completely different sports. I have one kid on my team who likes rock climbing, and the rest of them are like competition climbers, which like bums me out because I grew up in the gym just like you guys. I was a gym rat for like 15 years before I ever climbed outside at all once, and then as soon as I climbed outside, I moved to Colorado, and I predominantly climbed outside, and then when I moved to Las Vegas, I basically only climbed outside. I would go 6 months without going in the gym, and for me, that was like what I fell in love with even more than indoor climbing. Like that got me into the sport, but outdoor climbing was like what I really was passionate about, and it breaks my heart a little bit that they're just like they don't care about climbing outside, and when they do go outside, they hate it because they suck at it because it's so different. But I love them. But that's the other thing too, is like pushing them to get outside would make them such better climbers because they're so different these days that like footwork and trusting your feet and standing on those like minuscule like dime-sized edges, that will help in a comp. You come back into the gym and the footholds are huge compared to like anything you stand on outside. And so we try to get them climbing outside, and they don't like it at all. It's hard.
Well, a lot of that kind of speaks a little bit to the route setting too. This will be a little bit of a. I'm just curious if Jackie. I mean, you've been in the industry. You've been setting since like 1998, right? And now you're like a business owner with Kilter Grips, and they're amazing. But do you feel like there's this is an added question. I'm sorry, but do you feel like no added for you? You can answer it too, but it's about route setting. Like, do you feel like there's an added pressure as a setter to be able to set that style now? Like, is there like, do you see that's
like parkour style?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm like old and I don't want to do that stuff either. I hate when you're like in a comp or on a problem and you see what you're supposed to do and you just don't want to do it because you're like, oh, it's gonna hurt, or like whatever it is. Like I felt really bad with like Lisa in finals last night because we had that paddle dyno and she's like, her shoulders hurt. She's not gonna want to do that, but she gave it like 110% and almost did it in the comp. And did you end up doing it after? You were so close, which is awesome.
Also, Lisa Rands was in finals last night. What year is it? Like, what? She's been winning World Cups since I was like...
You were in finals last night, too. I mean,
me? Yeah, but...
I'm just saying.
She's a legend.
You were my first climbing hero. So are you. Still got it.
Yeah. No, I think it's important. I think history is really important just to go to that. And Lisa was climbing V9... V10 in the early 2000s when that was like news when men were climbing those grades. I mean, she pushed female bouldering forward internationally in a way that like she was like by herself, basically. So it's.
I feel like female bouldering would not be where it is today without Lisa.
Absolutely
like,
not.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. It's.
She was the first professional female boulderer. Not just like a specialty, yeah. Badass.
We're going to just keep this going until she actually,
I'm supposed to be
Emily's
moderating
turn now.
and I
She's
can't.
going to get redder.
You did this side of Paradise and Gaia.
So the parkour style movement. We actually talk about this a lot in the route setting crew because Flan sets a lot of like, she used to set a bunch of the World Cups or help forerun them, and she was never officially a setter, but she totally set like the most World Cups in the U.S. of any of in the Vail at Vail, because she's awesome. And so she's more into like the new style. I don't know where Flan is. She's somewhere. She can hear us. That's like the new style. I just like the old style. Like I think that there's nothing cooler than watching somebody, especially in climbing, especially a woman, just like show off that kind of power. So to me, like the fourth final of the comp last night, that's what I want to watch. And I might be the minority now, but like I just think that's so awesome to see. That boulder is just straight up hard. Like if you're not, and like Yeah, it was hard. I mean, Alex may not look like it, but she told me she almost fell off the whole way.
Every move.
Yeah, and I like that. I enjoy that. It's just, that might be different from what the style is, but I think it's really cool. And the World Championships just happened in Austria, and the boulders were very parkoury and jumpy, and there's been a huge discussion about it. And the problem is it's really hard. As you guys saw, 3 people flashed the final. The last final, they all almost fell off, but they didn't. Actually, did Kelly do a second go? Yeah. But
She did it. I don't know.
I think she flashed it. Yeah, you weren't watching. Oh, totally. Yeah, she fell off here. Yeah. Anyway, the criticism of that was that there were too many jumps. It was like a dyno comp, and that's not climbing. And sometimes you find that in climbing is cool, but it's not what a lot of climbing is. The kind of thing I like to see is like, the boulder problem, the mandala and bishops, like super iconic. It's just hard pulls.
Which Lisa did the first female set of.
Hey.
If you guys ever want to know any facts about Lisa Rance, I did a report on her in high school. I know all the facts. Yesterday in ISO, they came up and they were like, Lisa, can we ask you some questions to like announce the comp? And they were like, when was the last time you competed? And I was like, 2011 in Washington, D.C. at the Earth Trucks. And Lisa was like, ask AJ, she knows.
You got 5 more minutes to eat into Jackie's question to just nerd out about Lisa.
Oh yeah,
Rance.
we
That's
just
fine.
totally went off on a
That's
tangent.
fine. Yeah.
So like, again, like Lisa told us, she like hasn't. Okay, first of all, she's like, I haven't been training. She's a coach. She's super busy. Her shoulder's hurt. She's been climbing forever. She still made finals, first of all, which is awesome, and then like did pretty well. And I mean, that 4th boulder, I feel like it's a classic U boulder if you were like feeling healthier, which was like awesome. But that kind of power. I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I'm trying to make you feel good.
Well, there's like,
Yeah, do you want to stand up?
we can pivot back into route setting.
Anyway, I think it's really cool to get it to kind of mix the two. So you can have some parkour kind of stuff. It just should be interesting. And I think that, again, the level of what I was trying to say about people flashing the final or doing it really quickly or the last final, is that they were all kind of at their max. And the problem with setting finals that are only a bunch of boulders like that is that there's a certain degree to which it's like such a subtle level of like, if the footholds had been slightly smaller, they might all have fallen off and no one would have done it or whatever. So it's so hard to dial that in. And those dynamic moves, like you create falls with those, so it's easier to split people up. I'm hoping that we can move towards being able to dial in really hard climbing, because like all those people wouldn't go outside and all flash the same. They might all flash the same V12, but they wouldn't all flash the same V13. So being able to dial that difficulty in would be a really interesting thing in setting.
And that kind of expertise really comes from like decades of route setting, and that is one of the areas in the industry that I think you see the least amount of like just diversity in general, but especially like gender diversity. And as somebody who has been in the field forever, if you have any thoughts about like what's that been like for you, like sort of coming, well, you don't have to go into that, but like, or maybe more specifically, like what would you like to do now to sort of change the way we either like talk about or frame route setting, or what are the things that we can do to sort of to get more people who represent the people in the gym setting the problems that the people in the gym are going to be on?
Right. Yeah, so I was talking about this a little bit earlier when I was saying like we want to set problems that like older climbers feel comfortable on. We want to set problems that newer climbers feel comfortable on. And so one of the biggest things is like in climbing, hierarchy just naturally always forms based on strength. So like the strongest person is seen as like the most valuable member of the route setting team initially, maybe. Or like that person's strong, they could be a setter because they'll be able to climb all the grades. But the majority of the customers in a gym, majority of climbers are climbing like up to V5 and 511 or maybe like 12A. Like that's most of your customer base is like 510 and like V4, V3. And that's great. Like those are great grades to learn to climb, to continue climbing, to challenge yourself, to have a good time. You can do all kinds of interesting movements at V3 and 510. I mean, we used to have a thing at every setter loves setting 510s because you can do really interesting moves, but they're still really fun. So anyway, you can create these challenges. And what starts to happen, and it happens in a lot of gyms, is if your setting crew is all like the strongest boys that are in town, like they're all pretty young and they're all pretty fit, and they don't have a good like way to calibrate those lower grades. And they also don't have really good empathy normally for climbers of different body sizes and different ability levels and different strengths. So I think that it's really important to have a diverse setting crew because you're brought to your product, you're setting for your customers to like fulfill their needs and help challenge them, help them grow. And you need people that are able to do that. And so somebody that's been climbing for 3 years is going to be really able to emphasize the empathizing with someone who is learning to climb, because you remember what it's like to like really the size of this handhold makes a huge difference, or the size of that foothold or the angle of that foothold makes a huge difference to them. And to someone that's been climbing for 20 years or someone that's been climbing for 5 years but as a 20-year-old boy, like they may have a totally different experience, but they don't need that. And so learning to place value on people in the crew for different reasons I think is really important. And like, yeah, like they're not going to be able to forerun the hardest climbs, but the percentage of hardest climbs in the gym is relatively small compared to what you need to have a healthy climbing gym. And so just being able to like, as for women to understand, like you have value as a setter because of what you can provide. Like the movements you provide are going to be interesting and help all the setters grow, or all the climbers grow. Like Alex was saying about climbing outside makes you a better climber. Climbing different styles and different moves makes you a better climber, and having more different like perspectives, creating those styles and moves is just going to make all of your climbers better in your gym and give all of them more to work on. So if you want to set as a woman or as a man who's like not the strongest climber yet, but you're really interested in movement and you're interested in the intricacies of how you can like choreograph what people are going to do and encourage them to climb the right way and all these things that some of us are really nerdy about, you can create value for your community if you want to. You just have to be able to want to work hard. Like it's a hard job, but it's a lot of fun as well. And yeah, just value what you have to offer, basically.
I promise I don't talk about Lisa.
She's right there. You can't promise that.
So there's this phrase called the fallacy of authority, and that means that just because you're good at doing something means you're good at teaching it or instructing it, and that, like for me, I am a terrible route setter. But I can break down a route and tell you exactly how they want you to climb it and how you want to move on it. And so like Jackie said, the best climbers in the gym do not often make the best route setters. And so even if you've only been climbing for a year, if you want to start route setting, shadow your head route setter. We have our head route setter at our gym. He brings on like some of our team kids who want to learn more about movement and route setting, and he brings them on and they shadow, and then they start setting, and he helps them learn how to set. And if you've been climbing for 6 months or a year, it'll help with your movement immensely, but just because you think that you aren't good enough or haven't been climbing long enough, like, it does not mean you would not be a good route setter, because I suck at it. Like, I'm really bad at route setting. And Jackie's a bad comp climber. Yeah, I can't either.
You do them in comps, though. I said I can't do one-arm pull-ups, and she said she can't either, but I feel like I've seen her do them repeatedly in my life. I mean, I don't know. Seems like it. Yeah, I started setting like 4 or 6 months after I started climbing. I just got lucky. I was in a small gym where I could have the space to learn. That's not super normal. I feel super fortunate, especially 20 years ago, that could happen. But you can ask your head setter, hey, I'm super interested in route setting. Can I watch holds? Can I watch you guys forerun? Can I put holds away? Because honestly, even washing holds and putting holds away is a good way to learn the holds, and that's like your catalog of tools, basically. So you need to learn the holds. You need to know what all the holds are like and how to use them. Can I help you guys forerun? Can I watch you forerun if they won't let you help? Can I help one of your setters set a problem and just like help understand, or like them talk to me about what the moves are so I can understand? Just whatever you can do, basically. Can I volunteer? Can I trade? And I'm not saying you should work for free for a long time, but it's hard for a lot of gyms to want to pay someone to learn to set because it takes time. And it's something you want to do, you might have to do some of it for free or kind of like wash holds or something, but to get into it. And then, you prove your worth and be willing to learn, and then you go through all these stages of like detaching yourself from what you've set. Like it's your art, but it's also a product and all these things. And it's a fun journey, though. I just use the word journey.
You did, I know. I love hearing you talk about route setting. It's great. But we'll never ask any of you to work for free. Just let's be clear about that. But
Touchstone won't?
Touchstone won't. No, that's weird. So we're gonna take a hard left a little bit to get into a question that I wanted to ask you, Beth, last year, and now I can also ask Shelley, and I think maybe nobody else on this panel. But I wanted to talk a little bit about motherhood in climbing. Like Shelley, you said you were a climbing mom for much of your youth raising your son, and Beth, you often talked really publicly about what it's like being a mother and how that's changed your career professionally and just personally as a climber. And I'd be really interested in hearing sort of your different experiences and how they might be kind of similar. And a lot of folks are interested in like what that change does to climbing for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have totally different experiences. So I think it'll be interesting. So my son is here, Noelani. He's 22. He's a wonderful climber and is very, very supportive of my climbing, as is my wife, but we're not talking about spouses right this moment, although you talked about Bree. When he was young, we went to the Oakland Zoo one time, and where we live, and they have this tiny little roller coaster thing, and I'm very scared of roller coasters, but because he wanted to go on it, I went on it. And I actually made the person stop in the middle because I was so scared. But years later, we were in Santa Cruz, and in Santa Cruz, they have this huge roller coaster, and I actually went on it only because he wanted to go on it, and I was scared out of my mind, and I don't know that I'll ever do it again. But I did do it, which brings me to climbing. I know that there's no way I would ever climb if it hadn't been for Noelani and being at the gym all the time and seeing him climb. And then as he was getting ready to go to college, being at a comp with him and thinking, wow, I think I want to try this. And also, though, being around women who were older, as I am and was even then, who realized that it's important to do some strength training. So it was the two together. But if I hadn't been a mother, there's just no way that I would be climbing because it seemed so alien and foreign to anything that I was possibly interested in. So motherhood really opened me up to this amazing world, which I think is totally different experience than yours.
So I grew up climbing, so climbing was a part of me since I was a kid. And I was getting to a point in my climbing career where it was hard to push myself physically anymore, and also getting to an age where I think a lot of people think about having kids. But because I was this professional climber and athlete, I was terrified actually to take that step and become a mom. My body, is my job, and also it was pretty taboo back then. Like, not that many professional women climbers had kids, or if they did, that's kind of when they like bowed out of the stage, and you didn't really hear from them anymore. I remember being at a crag one time, and somebody was asking about where our friends were, and I was like, oh, she's pregnant. And the guy, his response was, oh, shit. And I was like, that's not a very good response, It should be like, wow, that's really exciting for them, or whatnot. And so I kind of like carried that with me, like, oh, man, people are going to think I'm making a mistake or whatnot. But finally kind of got over that, and we tried to get pregnant, and we did. And I thought this was a good time to, be brave and vulnerable, and I just started writing about it and, putting it out there. And I got, messages from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women all around the world because this wasn't really talked about. And even, from the safety aspect of it, like, is it safe to climb while you're pregnant? Should you even do that? And you get, like, sideways looks at the crag or at the gym. And, there was this community that was created, and for me, it was one of the biggest boost to my self-confidence and how I viewed this climbing community, because it was so accepting. I'd only ever known it as this high-achieving athlete, and once I realized that this community was here as mothers as well, and you can lament and just be like, oh God, I didn't even make it out the door today, let alone get a pitch-in or even a boulder problem, and then start traveling with people who have other kids, and you can really support each other. So it was this really life-changing experience for me, and also I think being able to talk about it and show companies that it's a relatable thing, and that there's a lot of people out there that want to keep climbing and have families. The companies that I work with have been incredibly supportive and see it as a thing that we should talk about and that we should promote and support.
Thank you. We're doing so well on time. We're gonna have so much time for questions. I hope you guys have them. This is my last question. It's for everyone, and you can sort of pick and choose what works for you. But whether or not this has anything to do with any of like the various sort of like identities you share or variously inhabit in moments, if there have been any experiences where you felt unsupported or alienated by the climbing community, and what we can do together now, sort of as a group, to think about to be the change you want to see. I think people hear that a lot, but I think it's something that we're all sort of like earnestly looking for, and I'm just curious about your perspectives on that. Anyone can start.
Emily, you want to start? Okay, wait, what's the question?
Were there ever times where you felt like alienated by the community?
Right, okay. I feel pretty fortunate because I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, in one of the climbing meccas of the world, and I felt very much like a welcome part of that community. I basically was raised in that community, and that's where I built my friendships and my identity and everything. And I would say that the one thing that I struggled with growing up was this idea that I was always really afraid when I was climbing. Like, I was afraid of falling, I was afraid of exposure, I was afraid a lot of basically everything that defines rock climbing. And I would just like have these meltdowns, like on the wall, like refusing to take lead falls and just like beating myself up over it and being so ashamed that I was afraid. And I just wish that someone had told me that it was okay to be afraid. And I wish that, and so that's kind of what I try to do now for people who ask me how to deal with fear of falling or being intimidated or whatever. It's like, it's a really normal human emotion to feel, and we shouldn't be ashamed of it, and we shouldn't shy away from it, and we should really try to embrace it and try to use it as a strength and try to analyze it and talk about it. I mean, this is what we talked about in my clinic today, was kind of being okay with those feelings and trying to work with them and trying to communicate with each other about them and support each other. So there's that side, but that's really kind of, I guess, like an internal struggle. And then the other one that I think I've dealt with that I definitely see a change in more recently is, as a female professional athlete, I feel like there used to be this idea that there was only room for one of us. You know, like there was only like, each company had like its one female climber that they supported, and there was just one, and they didn't need another one. And so I feel like it bred a little bit of unhealthy competition amongst us and amongst maybe our generation. Like, I felt very threatened by a lot of the other females, and I felt jealous. And, you know, I think a lot of that is probably my own ego, but it's also this like perception that another person's success is my failure. And I think that that's changing a lot. I really see it with like the younger generation coming up. They're just so nice, and they're so supportive, and they're so friendly. And I feel like it's because they don't have that idea. Like they see one person's success as everyone's success. And so it's kind of like, I mean, this event itself is a testament to this idea that like the rising tide lifts us all, and we should all be supportive of each other. We should all take care of one another. And so I do see that as something that's changing, but it was something that I struggled with a lot throughout the early phases of my career.
Yeah, I was actually going to echo, that was what I was going to say, is that I feel like it's changing a lot, the competition amongst, the inner competition that I used to feel. I feel like that is dissipating, but I feel that that's something that we can all work on and try and champion each other. That I know that, was like the unspoken truth that was going around. And I just feel like we don't need that, because Emily succeeds on something doesn't mean that I'm not going to succeed on it or whatnot. And it's really good to just champion each other.
No, that was awesome. I'm genuinely, that was, yeah. That never crossed my mind until you said it. But yes, here's me with my yeses. Interesting. Now I'm thinking about it. Come back to me.
What? Will you repeat the question that you want answered? Because I was listening to Emily and then Beth, and I was like, yeah, but I don't know what you want me to talk about.
I was just curious if there have been times when you felt alienated by the climbing community, and if there are changes that you would like to see, or that you've been seeing, or that you think are options for that not happening to anybody else in the future.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in the routes as a route setter, yes. Like everything I've ever done, basically. There's been very few female setters until very recently. At the spot, my assistant head setter, and who's now the head setter of the spot, I've stepped out to be a kilter. She has continued this, but we find and train other female setters to kind of make more. This event we just worked, we had 11 girls on the crew. Several of them I'd never met before, which is awesome. Sarah's the head setter at the spot now. She and I went to Kentucky last year and did another women's setting event. That's actually where we met Allie. That's Allie right there. She's gonna be uncomfortable. And she's awesome, so we brought her out for this event. But there was like 30 female setters there that we had never met before, which is so awesome. So I think people are understanding, like, women can do this job, and it's good to have women on the crew, not just so like show diversity, but because it's actually important for creating a good product. So I feel like I did a lot of this by myself, and I definitely like fought my way into positions and got like, I don't know if it's because like what Emily was saying about, there's only one woman, but like with setting, there were so few jobs that it was really competitive. And unfortunately, as a woman, you often are like the bottom on the social hierarchy, no matter like what your actual skill level is or what your actual personality is. Like, I'm not shy. I think most people that know me know that. But I still felt like it was just constantly like my opinion like just was not heard as much, even though I had more experience, and I was not considered in the same way that like the guys I was setting with were considered, like, always. So yes, but also like, it didn't really ever bum me out because like I knew that I was just like one girl doing a thing that mostly only guys do, and like I'm fine with. I've been a tomboy my entire life. The opposite problem from like Alex is like I've always dated men and I've never wanted to date anybody else, but like I've always been a tomboy. So I think that the expectation of me is different than I actually am. And with setting, it's kind of the same. A female setter coming in, and people know me now, but like female setter coming in, you don't really know what you're getting, and you don't expect someone that maybe has like experience or has like, I think that it used to be that people didn't expect you to have much to offer, basically. And I think now people are expecting female setters to have a lot to offer, which is great. I just totally like, whew. But yeah, no, that was good. You did great. I'm going to stop and give this back to Alex, and we'll see what else she has to say. We can come back.
Yeah, come back to me.
I should have thought before it got to me, but I was listening.
Or we just have nothing negative to say.
You never got upset about the climbing community? You never felt like pushed out or like not supported?
I don't know. Not recently. Like, I just have like a super positive vibes lately. So I think it's hard maybe retrospectively to think about a time that wasn't positive.
She was real grumpy for like a couple years at one point.
Super jaded.
Why?
Yeah.
It's the same thing Emily was saying. It's like you and Lucio always.
We can come back.
Sorry. I think for me, feelings of alienation happened when we started the group. It was like, and it's kind of ironic because we were starting the group to build community, but there was backlash to us starting the group. There were people who were like saying things like we were creating a divide in a climbing community by creating the Brown Ascenders, a space for people of color to feel comfortable in the climbing community. And people just like, that's like the nice way of saying it. And there were people saying the same thing in like not such a nice way. And so it's kind of like, in polite company, no matter what people think, in polite company, they'll keep those thoughts to themselves. But then when they're faced with something that challenges like those thoughts that they keep to themselves and they decide to say them out loud, especially with the gift of the internet. So that was, it was this, it wasn't really a realization, right? I knew these feelings and these thoughts existed inside of people, but it was definitely something that helped fuel the push for creating the Brown Ascenders and making me feel like, hey, yeah, this is like this fight back from like my community is showing me that we definitely need to create this space. And like when we got back from Color to Crag and like just the experience of Color to Crag in general, like being in a space with all people of color, climbing outdoors with different skill levels, it was just incredibly beautiful, and wanting to bring that feeling back to the Bay Area with me. And then like since we've started, like all of these groups are popping up everywhere. There's like 2 or 3 climbers of color. There's PDX, climbers of color. There's Sending in Color. There's Soul Ascension Group in Sacramento. Like there's all of these like POC-oriented climbing groups that are popping up all over the place. So it's like we can't all be wrong. Like we're not all like seeing a need that isn't really a need in creating these groups. And so I would say that that's where I felt like, I guess, the most divided, in the act of trying to like create a group to pull community together, like people that identify with my specific community group. And so yeah, it's just interesting, and like you learn how to. I mean, I already have a tough skin. I'm a designer. Like you can't be a designer and not have a tough skin. I don't know how many designers are out there, but I'm sure you guys understand. It's so yeah, it's like I let it roll off, because like in all honesty, when people are coming at us with the things that they have to say, it's not a reflection of us, it's a reflection of the bullshit that lives inside of them. So it's like I kind of just feel bad for them and their demons that they need to deal with. So yeah,
I had to think about that too. I was listening to everyone. I was like, yeah, that's how I feel. I feel like in my stomach, like butterflies, but more of the like those feelings. Well, I guess they're butterflies. For me, I never really felt alienated within the rock climbing community, but I did feel alienated within the outdoor industry. So going to the outdoor retailer, working for Mad Rock, and then leaving the booth, and then going and navigating the show, and then going to like Black Diamond or Marmot or all these other really cool brands with awesome products, just knowing that like I didn't see anyone that looked like me. And that in itself was intimidating, or just not understanding like the language or how to get to point A to point B, because the resources weren't there for me. I just got really lucky, ended up with a job out of thin air, and then ended up in the outdoor industry. And you know, now after like 8 years of going to the show every year, I'm starting to see people of color, and that has given me so much hope for diversity and inclusion and equity to really be at the forefront of how brands have relationships with different organizations or different groups, and really trying to change the market for the greater good, because without the diversity piece to it, how are you going to really attract different folks from all walks of life so that they can enjoy rock climbing? And so for me, you know, I almost gave up, like I had mentioned, and it was because there was so many biases and microaggressions that I was being presented just walking in. Like, I'm not a professional rock climber. I am part of the rock climbing community, but I had to prove myself in other ways that I didn't have those resources, and nobody wanted to give me those jobs, and it was really difficult because I wanted to be in this space. I just didn't know how to get there, and so I somehow navigated that way through volunteering and finding other ways where they were just as meaningful and even so powerful, because the good work, if I weren't part of Latino Outdoors, if I wasn't helping local organizations here to get to those relationships with the outdoor industry, then I don't think a lot of these conversations would be happening now either. You know, with Brown Girls Climb and Brothers of Climbing, like, they're my friends, and we are a small group of individuals really trying to change that narrative. And if we didn't support one another, I think that there would be that competition that we don't want to have, even within POC groups. You know, we're trying to change it for the greater good. And I also felt like what these wonderful ladies are saying is that the internal struggle that we all have as women is that we always try to one-up one another instead of coming together and really supporting one another. And I see that in the gym sometimes. I see that, there are the strong cliques, and they all hang out, and then you get some of the newbies wearing the rental shoes coming in, and no one's talking to them, and then they feel really intimidated. And so, I feel some type of responsibility to go up to them and say, like, hey, maybe try this and this and this. Maybe that's the wrong shoe size, or like maybe try these moves, or maybe try this route. And then that just kind of changes the way that they feel about that presence in the gym, especially as women. Like some of us have that, like, slight competition with our friends because, we want to see if we can finish that problem, differently, or maybe we have better beta. But like if you see someone and they're struggling a little bit, maybe go up to them and just say, like, try this instead, or maybe you might like this problem. We're working on this. Maybe you want to try it out. Just kind of being that welcoming individual in that space, and then you'll be surprised they might join, and you'll see them the next time, and then you have a new friend.
So it's an ugly world out there politically. I think we all know that with this current administration and a potential Supreme Court nominee. And this does relate to climbing because there is all that out there, and then there's climbing. And so for me, climbing is, I'm in my own world there, divorced from all these other forces that I think affect all of us, and I in a way feel like I'm in this little bubble. So I actually don't feel alienated. I am extremely grateful that I don't feel alienated in the climbing community, given all the political realities that we face.
I want to say one more thing. I'm going to pretend I'm just going to speak on behalf of Alex so she doesn't have to talk.
Oh, yeah. You kind of, yeah.
You talk.
I think yeah. Jackie reminded me like a kind of a point. It's hard to follow. When have I felt alienated? I fit in this sport basically like better than anyone. I don't know. It's like I grew up in it. I've been in it for forever. I've never felt alienated in it really, aside from like maybe doing it to myself. But there was like a time a couple years ago where I was grumpy with climbing, just jaded, and I think that came from maybe like what Emily said with like competitive nature among us when there weren't so many of us. I felt like I had paid my dues and was like, all right, like what's up? Like, I don't know if you guys are following. But I had like been in the sport for forever and like done some hard shit, like won some comps, and was like, cool, like what? Where's my cake?
Where's your recognition?
Can you?
Yeah. Like you start this. This is like at a privileged level, sort of, but there's this expectation of like a possible progression, right? So Alex had progressed to like the highest level that we saw possible. So she was climbing really hard. She like won the first World Cup she entered. She won the first World Cup she entered in Europe. She was like this. That should be like, you're a professional. Here's your new car, in other sports. And it sounds like entitled, but on the other hand, like it's like she's raised in this pretty privileged situation where she like worked her ass off at this thing and gotten really good at it. And like in other sports, that's like a career. And then found like that isn't a career. And then she like reinvented kind of like how she's going to make it her career. And also, as the sport is growing right now, it's going to be a profession. Like route setting is a legitimate profession. I have a friend that is a nurse, and he actually is a professional setter, and he went back to setting because he gets paid as much as he was getting paid nursing, and he likes it like a billion times more. That's a new thing. That wasn't a thing. This wasn't like Emily and Beth were saying. There was like one job, and now there's a lot more jobs, and there's a lot more ways to have jobs. So like Alex has found working with kids to be super fulfilling. And it's like a way to give back as well as be a professional in this industry, which is like way better than someone just handing you everything anyways.
Yeah.
But
I have to cut you off, Jackie. You're the best. I'm so sorry. I have to cut you off, though. I know. We're gonna. I'm sure people are gonna.
No, it's okay. I'll just ramble forever if you let me.
I know. It's just really interesting to hear that for a lot of you, it seems like you've had to experience like whether your hardships feel like they're systemic or they're personal or however it feels inside. Like you've had to just sort of grow the thick skin and deal with it on your own. And I hope that events like this will give us an opportunity to recognize that we all are sort of having those experiences, and that we can sort of see each other across the room and be like, hey, like you're not alone. Like, I also don't want you to do that. I don't want anybody to have to go through that. Like, let's sort of like try and change the sport together. So that's what this is all about. And thank you so much for you guys being on the panel and for your time and your thoughts and being vulnerable up here.
You should say that again, what you just said, trying to change the sport together. That's like what the whole thing is. These guys are like in here, these girls are in here making safe spaces for everybody that wants to join.
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
what we should all be trying to do.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. So now that you guys know how brilliant and amazing all of these ladies are, it's your opportunity to ask them questions. Oh man, all right, here we go. We haven't figured out how we're gonna do this yet, so I'll just run over to you.
Hi, thank you. Oh, that's really loud. You're right. Okay, so for me, I think my only struggle I've had in the climbing community is being an adult and trying to figure out how to make climbing more serious and progress more under the life circumstances of having a full-time job. Trying to, we don't have time to have a trainer. We're not a kid where we can dedicate everything to climbing. How do we fit our goals for climbing when there really aren't, I personally haven't seen too many options for adult climbing teams, nights to train as an adult, like things like that. Because I love this. I wish I found it when I was younger, but
Everybody wishes they found it when they were younger, like no matter how young you were when you started.
Yeah, so trying to find out how I can fit this into my life as a more serious thing under the circumstances of my day-to-day life. So I don't know if you guys have any suggestions.
One good resource, there are several different like personal trainers that are just for climbing, like the Climbing Sensei, Power Company Climbing, Training Beta, that are websites where they'll provide you with, and there's like Climbing Magazine and Rock and Ice, I think both have a plan. They'll provide you with a plan. The cool thing about the Climbing Sensei is that there's also a coach. They'll provide you with a plan. They'll do some, like if you're here and they're somewhere else, they'll do some online coaching with you to try to provide for that need, because there isn't like a really good setup in most gyms for adult teams. That's also something you could potentially create a group and then try to talk a coach into working with you guys. You girls, I always just call everyone guys. Emily, I don't remember when I met Emily exactly, but we both have been on a team in Boulder called the women's, what was it called? The women's team? Yeah. And we just did like weights for like an hour on Tuesdays and then like climbed on Thursdays. And that's like, the amount of climbing you need to do to get better is not as much as you think. It's just you need to be consistent. And if you're lacking like a major strength, then you need to address that as well. So like maybe you do a little bit of weights or something. Most gyms do have personal trainers and coaches that you can approach and hire for like personal sessions. So like in Boulder at the spot, we have a lot of people that do personal sessions once a week with our head coach. And then they also she gives them like 2 other days a week of homework to do. You can have an effective workout in a climbing gym in an hour. You can come in here at your lunch hour 3 days a week and work out. And it's sort of like lifting weights if you're doing the right things, and that's enough to help you head towards the goals. And then if you have a specific problem, like you're having a mental problem with certain moves or fear or something, then you can approach that as well with your coach or with one of the online coaches, or again, like do what these ladies did and make your own team. Just put up a poster. Adult wanting other adults to climb with.
She answered.
You got it all. Yeah, you're good.
Who else? We're gonna throw it this way. Go back.
Hi, I had a question for Marcy. I really resonated with one of the things that you just said about supporting like newer climbers at the gym. A lot of my girlfriends like don't climb anymore because they feel like they're not good enough, but like we were all not good enough at some point. But I find that I'm also affected by this whole like independent woman thing too. It's like we don't want to be mansplained. I don't want to be a mansplainer. So like how do we balance the two? Like sometimes I feel like that alienates me from the women community because I want to help people be independent, but I also want to help them, and you can't be both.
So how can I explain it? When I was working with Mad Rock, I was a product rep here in Southern California. So I would size people, talk to people about shoes, and then I'd see like the new climbers, and I'd gravitate to them and just be like, hey, what's up? How's it going? Like, I'm so and so. Just kind of like starting at grassroots level. You know, eye contact is always important. Making sure that body language also plays a part, so I like to show my wrists. I'm totally a sociologist, so I start nerding out on all of this. So I was, like, hey, what's up? How's it going? And just being really friendly and just like, oh, I noticed you were doing this climb. Would you mind if I gave you some pointers? Like, I'd love to help you out on this climb if it's cool. Kind of allowing for them to say yes or no, but just offering that service to them and just like, hey, if you're interested, like, I'm climbing on this problem over here, like, you're more than welcome to hang out with me. Or like, if they're in a group, be like, hey, introduce yourself, and just like, if you'd like to climb with me, I'm here for a couple hours. Or it's just trying to be friendly, making yourself a little bit more familiar with like the landscape too, because I know some people usually put like the headbuds in now, and you don't want to talk to them because they're like in a different zone, but it's just about really just marketing yourself in a way that is presentable without selling anything. It's basically you're selling yourself and your time, and you just want to make sure that they're enjoying their time if they're struggling, or just having a conversation like, I've been noticing that you were doing this for a bit. Like, are you having trouble with like the movement, or like, what do you think about this? Or you're like, maybe try to close up your hands a little bit, don't over grip, hang on your arms a little bit, and then something starts turning in their head, and then they realize like you're not a threat to them, you're helping and you're supporting them, and then it just makes it more comfortable for them to approach you if they do go back to the gym and if they do see you.
Questions?
Hey y'all. My name's Amelia. I work at Hollywood Boulders. I'm the youth coach, and I also host She Rocks. So if you're looking for other lady crushers to come climb with, small plug, Mondays, second and fourth Mondays of the month at Hollywood. Anyways, this question is for everybody, but mostly for Emily. I follow you on Instagram, and I see your day-to-day, and it's a lot. I just saw that you're going to be away from home for 2 months. So I think a lot of us here work full-time jobs, and we experience burnout. How do you manage being away with your career, away from, the things that you love, like your dog and your boyfriend, and home?
Well, full transparency, I had a total meltdown this morning because I was like, oh my God, I'm leaving for 2 months and I don't want to. But I actually do, because what I do is amazing, and I feel super fortunate, and I love it. And I think, all of us struggle with balance in some form or another, whether that's, career, passion, family, relationships, all of those things. We're all kind of constantly juggling those things. And, with what I do, it just so happens to be that I juggle, traveling a lot and maintaining my relationship and trying to figure out what the next 5 years of my life is going to look like. I want to have a family someday as well. So that's also something like in the future that's terrifying. But thanks to Beth, it's getting better. She's been an inspiration. I think it's never going to be perfect, and it's never going to feel exactly how you want it to feel. And I think for me, that realization has been really important to me. I've actually started doing this thing because I have this problem where I'm always kind of like thinking about what I'm doing next and what it's going to be like, and like where I'm going to go and how I'm going to do it and how I'm going to pack. And I really like to plan, I like to organize, and I get really anxious about it. And I start to stress out, and I start to like freak out and melt down like I did this morning. And then I've started to just like take a breath and remind myself to like be here now. And that I just say that to myself. It like reminds me to just be right here in this place with all of you. And it kind of just like grounds me and takes me back and makes me realize how lucky I am, and how, it's going to be chaotic and I'm going to be exhausted sometimes, but I get to travel around the world and go rock climbing, and that's an amazing gift. And I get to be here and share my experiences with you and be inspired by you, and that too is an amazing gift. And so, I guess the bottom line is it's never going to be perfect. We're all just kind of like trying to make it work, but we're all fortunate enough to be here and to be passionate about something and to be able to make the time to be here together and to make climbing a part of our lives. And, I think, just like I said, it's always going to be a little bit of a struggle, but we should embrace that, and we should kind of enjoy it and just like take the time to realize how lucky we are to have this.
That's awesome. Any more questions?
You want me to talk really fast? I'll just go really fast. I feel like I'm someone my relationship with climbing has kind of like ebbed and flowed, and I've removed myself from it a few times, at some points for up to a year, because I grew up and it was so intense competing. My senior year of high school, I took almost completely off of climbing, and about a year or two ago, I took almost another year off of climbing and got super into mountain biking. So for me, when I'm not feeling it, I don't do it, because forcing myself to do it when I'm not in love with it, I start to like resent it a little bit and get mad at it. And if I'm not in the mood, I don't go. And then I eventually re-fall back in love with it for different reasons that I didn't know before, and that sort of like reignites and rejuvenates my passion for it. Don't force it. Sorry.
Hi, my name's Albie. My question's for Jackie, and I'm an artist, and I'm really passionate about climbing, so I want to get into sculpting holds, and I'm wondering what that professional environment is like and how someone can get into it.
Oh man, what is that professional environment like? It is dynamic, is what we say. Yeah. My partner is a artist in every sense of the word, so some days everything is on fire, and some days he won't get out of bed for 3 days, and some days he's making like the most amazing thing you've ever seen. Yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell. Alex knows him very well. So, I mean, honestly, like I feel what I described, like with Kilter, we're running forward all the time. So we have so many ideas, and there's so many things we want to do, and the industry's growing a lot right now. And the thing that slows us down and slows everybody down is like the logistics of getting holds made. It's expensive and it takes time. So like what you do is you buy foam, right? And people say, buy floral foam, and you can do that. But if you want your holds to feel nice, you have to get really nice, expensive design foam, and it's like $5,000 for like a 8 by 4 foot by 1 or 2 foot thick pallet delivered. The shipping's like $400-800 thing. And then you have the responsibility of using as much of that as possible to make good climbing holds. And so if you were to start, what I'd say is try to order a smaller chunk of foam. Like there's actually a place called Coastal in California here that is one of the suppliers we get the foam from. We buy it from our local distributor, but you can buy it from them. There's different weights of foam. There's 2 pound, there's 4 pound, there's 6 pound, there's 8 pound, there's 10 pound. And you probably want like a 4 or 6 pound foam. And then just cut pieces off, like watch some videos on the internet, look at holds in the gym and see what about them makes them, like if you like it, it's comfortable, why is it comfortable, if it seems like it's a good hold or like not a good hold. And then just try making stuff. And so you could start with floral foam, but if you make something you really like it's not really gonna have a good texture for very long. And then the molding process, we send it to a factory, or we mold them ourselves and then send the mold to the factory. So it's silicone. Silicone's like $500 for like a 5-gallon bucket or something. It's obscene. It lasts for like 50 to 100 pulls of a hold. So like you make a silicone mold, you clean all the foam out, and then you start pouring like the resin mix. And we get factories do it, so they do like it, they cook it. It's all fancy, but you can get a home kits like what Allie had for you here for making the magnets. They were there, and then they were up there. And then you pour it, and after you make like 50 to 100 of those, you got to replace the silicone because it starts to tear every time you pull a hold out. So like it holds in the gym, like you'll notice that some of them are really slippery and some of them have like really too aggressive of a texture and some are in between. And that has to do with how old the hold is and how long it's been on the wall and stuff. And that's kind of a left from how do you start. I would recommend watching, there's a couple of videos of Ian on the internet where you can see some of the tools he uses. He just gets these little files from like eBay, China or something, and just kind of plays around with the foam, tries to figure out what it can do. And then he looks at a lot of pictures of rock. I don't shape holds really. I've done it a little bit. I think it's really interesting. Like when I first moved to Boulder, he used to have these art parties at his studio, and we would go and try to shape holds, and it was super fun. But running the business, there's like me and him and Griffin, and it's like all hands on deck all the time. I don't have time to be bad at something that he's amazing at and keep the business running. So I don't know if that's like a left also from your question, but I would say just try to get some good foam and just try it. Play around with it, and then you can buy a silicone kit. You can buy a smaller silicone kit from like Smooth On, I think, and you can mold your own holds. The biggest piece of advice I'm going to give you right now is make sure you have a flat surface, like put some grip tape on it or something, skate grip tape, and periodically sand the back of the hold so you make sure your hold has a flat surface and you feel it on that flat surface. It has to be flat or it's not going to go well on the wall, and that's like one of the things people just fail at. And just try out your ideas. And if you come through Boulder, give me a call and you can come get a tour of the studio and I'll show you like what we have going on there. And yeah.
Wear goggles and a mask.
Oh yeah. The foam is really, it's non-static, so it's actually not terrible for your lungs supposedly, but it basically like, it's so dirty. It's just like these little particles like all over you. We like vacuum off all the time. We try to keep it contained to like one area of the studio, but.
You should find Jackie after this because she'll talk about this for literally.
All right, I'm going to stop. Yep.
Yeah. We've got 2 more questions.
Okay, so as women, we're all women here, right? I think the reason I really love rock climbing and when I found it is because it's the first time ever. You guys talked a lot about being competitive with other women. It's the first time ever there's a sport where I am solely competitive with myself, which is both good and really bad. Because I would love to know how you all deal with the emotional barrier of climbing and challenging yourself. And as we balance our lives, and Emily, you talked about balancing lives and balancing motherhood and balancing barriers people put on us, and how do you guys handle the barriers we put on ourselves with climbing? I think that would be really helpful.
Beth literally named a route the meltdown.
I did. What'd you say? Yes, we did. We only use the gold mic over here. Oh gosh. I was going to wait to see what these guys said because I feel like I could talk about this for a long time. Maybe I'll let them talk about it because I actually touch on how I deal with this in my show, and so I'm going to give them the time. So,
I guess this comes back to the feeling alienated question is like I quit for a while because I felt so frustrated and burnt out and negative and like down and hard on myself. I was on the World Cup circuit for 2 years by myself as the only American. My second season on the World Cup circuit, I placed 7th at 5 events in a row and 6 go to finals. And my bib number at the World Championships was 77 and my hotel room was 777. It was like fucking ridiculous. I came home from that season on the World Cup tour and stopped climbing. So this is not a good answer. I'm like, fuck it, quit.
Just quit. Just give up.
But I'm still here and like came back into it. But like for me, that was like really rugged, and it like affected me a lot for years. This was like 2011 or 12, and I think just now I'm finally pulling myself out of it. And it has a lot to do with like the kids that I work with and trying to inspire them, and in turn I'm inspiring myself again. But I had a really hard time for like probably the last 6 years after like being crushed for like that one full season. Don't quit. But that, yes, it's really like this.
No, but I think what Alex says holds a lot of weight. I mean, you definitely have to give yourself the time and space to understand why you want to climb and what your motivations are and if those are good enough and worth it. And yeah, sometimes they're not. Sometimes you do need to take a break or something like that. But for me, I think that I am really open about being emotional and being vulnerable and really caring about my climbing to a point where I can be incredibly hard on myself. And I have a lot of meltdowns and they're on video. And I'm okay with that because that makes me a human. And I think it also is something that I've learned is like a part of my process. I don't shy away from it. And I recognize that I'm really hard on myself and that I can be unreasonable about things and try to be rational about it, but at the same time I'm not perfect with it. And I think, what I've learned is just like you kind of got to ride it out sometimes. Like if you're feeling afraid or intimidated or uncomfortable, like just feel those things and don't shy away from them, because the more you like kind of like push things aside and push them away, then it's just like it just gets pent up, and then you kind of explode, or I do. So yeah, I think confronting them and talking about them. I really do like talking about it and reaching out to my friends and explaining how I feel and communicating. That helps me process it the most, I think.
And will you say something about like because what I was going to say is I think for me, like if I'm having a hard time with climbing some style, I just go do a different style of climbing. And then you climbed Everest, so that's a different style of climbing.
We're going to give you 30 seconds so Shelley can jump in and then move on to the last question.
Oh,
wait.
I just want to speak from a non-professional point of view. And I think I have maybe an A-, B+ type personality. So there is that kind of drive to always improve, but sometimes you're not improving, you're actually getting worse. And I mean, it's a struggle, so I can totally relate, but I think it helps to realize that it is part of the practice in a way. And I think of it as a practice and in a way as a meditation. And that's part of climbing. And that you will get through it. And because you probably have gotten through it in the past, and you can get through it again.
Sorry, you can ask Emily.
Well, I just said, like, with me, if I'm having trouble, I just try to do a different style of climbing. Like, I go to sport climber, I like boulder, I hike, or I go find offwits and climb those, or whatever it is different. And Emily did that to an extreme degree because she went from being like a sport champion to climbing Everest.
Yeah, I do. I do like to mix it up a lot. I think that I mean, similar to what Alex is saying, if I do get burnt out from certain styles of climbing, and I have found that like the diversity within climbing and within like mountain sports is enough to give my mind and body a break. So I'll sport climb for a couple months, and then I'll go do something in the mountains, and then I'll ski or whatever. I kind of like to switch up my sports. I think it's healthy.
All right, last question. Let's make it good.
I guess I have more of a comment than a question. I just want to say thanks to everybody here. I started climbing 26 years ago, and I've been working in the climbing industry for 20 years. And for almost all that time, everybody saw outwardly a cis white male. And I looked for people in climbing who were trans or queer. And within the industry, at least, or outside of California or the Pacific Northwest or the coast, it almost doesn't exist. People are too afraid to come out. And in the last 5 years, seeing groups like Latino Outdoors and Unlikely Hikers and Flash Foxy and Afro Outdoors and all these start to represent people that are different than the normal narrative gave me hope. And I was at a place a year ago where I wasn't going to survive, and just seeing more and more of that, and the industry, while they're still being very slow to accept that and not doing everything that we would like them to, are starting to listen. And it's not just organizations like yours that are doing this, it's everyone here who is supporting this. The industry sees that this room is full of women who are wanting to learn from everyone on the panel and support the community, and that's what changes things. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikki. It's an honor that you're willing to be vulnerable with us. It's really great. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we move on to the keynote? Nope. We did it.
I was just going to say thanks, everyone. That was wonderful.
Thank you again to our panelists. Thank you all for participating and for being here and listening and making this event possible. We obviously couldn't do anything like this if nobody would show up. So thank you for showing up and for being a part of this. One final round of applause for our amazing panelists, please. You guys exceeded all expectations. No. It's fine. But find them afterwards to talk more. They're all super friendly and great. We're going to break down a little bit and move all of the things so that Beth can talk about her incredible life, and we'll be back shortly. Thanks, everyone.